The ERC deadline is right around the corner, and one of my clients was asking me, when should I apply? And the short answer to that is when you have a good idea. However, the real question that she had was, do I still have time to apply? As in, how long does it take? And the answer to that is, it depends. If you use my 4-step grant writing protocol, it takes on average 3 to 6 months to write a grant like that. And if this sounds like it could be you, today we're going to cover how long each of the 4 steps takes. If we haven't met, I'm Kathy Teresia. I'm a physicist and a career coach for brilliant scientists who are at a career transition. My job is to help you cross that energy barrier by defining your goals and creating a strategy to reach them so that you can create the career and therefore the life that you love. Step 1, have a good idea. That usually takes 1 month, plus or minus 10 years in order to become an expert in the field. Coming up with a good idea is a skill, and it's the hardest part. That's why we spend a whole module on that in single molecule or single scientist grant lab, because as we discussed a couple of months ago, without an idea that has a probability greater than 0.8 of being funded, the rest of the steps just don't even matter. That said, if you're a practical professor type, then it's more like 1 day. If this sounds like it could be you, you have my permission to skip this step because your vision is your competitive edge, especially when it comes to getting grants. And I'm jealous because it's certainly not my strength. In fact, I call my best friend, who is a practical professor type, in order to help me think through my ideas for my ERC. And if you don't know what your competitive edge is, you can find out at kathy.science/quiz. Professional tip. If you have a finite window to apply, for example, the ERC starting grant, the consolidator, you have 5 years. In that case, do not procrastinate until the last year telling yourself that you don't have a good idea. I'm speaking from personal experience. I waited until 3 of that 5-year window had elapsed, and then I had to get the starting grant that year. And also from professional experience, one of my clients waited until her window was closing, and then she didn't get that grant, and so we had to come up with another strategy for her to fund her lab. So this is an opportunity for you to learn from our mistakes. Step 2, refine the idea, which typically takes about 1 month. It's the part that people struggle with the most. And clients who have really nailed their grant strategy can usually do this in about 2 weeks. Part 1 is to prepare the proposal, which usually takes about 2 weeks. This research phase includes things like figuring out the level of CV that it takes to get a grant like this, making sure that you fill any holes to make your proposal competitive, reaching out to your network and asking for successful proposals if you don't have access to something like that inside a program like a grant writing course, deciding upon your panel and researching those panel members and their scientific background so you know your audience. Do not try to skip this step. You must do all this before you start writing. Otherwise, revising it will take much longer than if you just wrote it with the right perspective and in the right order the first time around. Part 2, which also takes about 2 weeks, is where you prepare to write. That's your outline, the structure of your specific aims, what goes in each one, how they flow together, what goes in the materials and methods versus what is a separate aim from a technological point of view. You know how to do that, and it's gonna take you about 2 weeks. Step 3, write the proposal, which is obviously the step that takes the longest. Now, you have 3 options here. Option A is it takes you 6 weeks full time, and that's with number 1, support. If writing comes quickly and easily to you, if you're good at writing grants and you have a track record of getting them, if you have a grant writing template or a previous year's successful grant to go off of if you're inside a structured grant writing program like GrantLab, then this is a clue that this could be you. And two, you have time. Writing this grant is your top priority. You're a master of time, and you've arranged your work schedule accordingly. And if this doesn't sound like it could be you because you're either not a master of time, in which case download the time log at kathy.science/time. I'll link it down below for you. Or you don't have the structured support of a grant writing program or template or experience, take option 2 and schedule 2 months to write your proposal. This is particularly helpful if it's your first big proposal. For example, the ERC starting grant took me 2 months to write full time because I didn't have support. I didn't have a me to help me, and because I procrastinate as a mood management method. If this sounds like it could be you too, good, I'm glad I'm not alone. Don't worry, you're not a bad person, you're not a bad scientist, your career is not doomed. You just have to develop the skills, as we talked about a couple of months ago, to deal with your emotions in another way. And it takes practice to master this skill. So if you don't have it yet, don't worry. Just give yourself extra time to procrastinate. Otherwise, you won't have enough time to write a grant with a high probability of getting funded. The third option is to schedule 3 months for step 3. This is particularly helpful if you have a ton of other priorities. For example, if you're writing a fellowship or a starting grant in order to leverage that to get a faculty position, then you're also in the middle of a faculty search and you're flying all around the world for those faculty interviews, in which case, give yourself 3 months to actually write the grant. If you try to write full time, you won't have time to take care of your mice or prepare properly for your interviews. And if you're a postdoc or a star scientist type, then that's a clue that this could be you. And this is essential for you because you'll write 1, a better grant, and 2, faster and more efficiently and easily if you're actually writing your grant in step 3 and not just sitting there stressed, anxious, worried, thinking about all the other stuff that you also need to get done. Don't try to skip step 3. Choose the option that matches your situation and schedule accordingly. Otherwise, it won't take you 3 to 6 months to write this grant. It'll take you another year because you won't be able to write a grant that actually gets funded and you'll have to apply again next year. Step 4 of the protocol is using feedback to improve your grant. Last week we talked about giving good feedback, but receiving good feedback is also a skill that you must learn. And if you're a people person like me, this is your competitive edge. It might take you 2 months to come up with a good grant idea, and you might need to invent a whole protocol in order to make that happen. And perhaps you need to check your ideas with all your visionary professor friends, but feedback and revision is a sharp knife. And in your hands, it's not just a tool, it's a weapon. That's what makes your grant much better than everybody else's. And step 4 of the protocol takes a minimum of 2 weeks because you need to give your reviewers at least a week to read your proposal and point out all the holes. And that's something that you do by scheduling it ahead of time and giving them exact dates of when you'll get it to them and when you need it back by. And of course, it takes you at least 1 week to incorporate all those revisions, to do some extra preliminary experiments in order to fill in those gaps that they pointed out to you, or purposefully decide not to. And this, of course, depends on your career stage and your funding track record. For example, my husband is a practical professor type, and he doesn't need to get feedback on his grants. He just writes them and then gets them on the first try. And if this sounds like it could be you, you have my permission to skip this step. Your protocol only has the first 3 steps in it. I had a client on a strategy call a couple of weeks ago who is a practical professor type. So of course she has a great vision for her grant, and she also has support from her department and also from my structured grant writing program with templates and examples and specific personalized feedback. And she was still like, but all this adds up to 2 months. If this sounds like it could be you, you're wondering, where am I gonna get all this time? Next week, we're gonna discuss why you need a work vacation.